Perfect, even better.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Cash, and I'm president of the French American Heritage Foundation, Minnesota. Thought we would tell you a little bit about our organization. Can't leave without a commercial. Our mission is to foster a greater understanding of the rich history and heritage of the French-speaking people who helped form what is now Minnesota. And we do that through a variety of ways. We put on programs such as this 3 or 4 times a year. We issue grants to individuals or organizations that will help further our mission. We publish books, as you may see or may have seen on the table as you walked in, or might see when you walk out. We publish a quarterly newsletter. We have a French-Canadian singing group called Les Canadiens Errants, the Wandering Canadians. And our next event will be on June 24th, I believe, whatever the Sunday is, which is La Fête de la Saint-Jean-Baptiste, or the Feast of John the Baptist, which is the Quebec national holiday. As you can imagine, they really don't celebrate Canada Day too much in Quebec, so they harken back to their patron saint, John the Baptist. So with that, I would like to introduce Neil Simonson. Neil is a wealth of knowledge on many subjects. He's quite the historian and history buff, but he's going to talk a little bit about his past. He felt our organization was a little bit too oriented towards the French Catholics. I myself am both descended from Huguenot and French Catholic, so I'm ambivalent, although I do lean one way. Anyway, Neil,
Thank
please.
you. Good job. Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for showing up. What a nice place this is. The Washington County Historical Society has got all kinds of programs, almost weekly. It's just an unlimited amount of knowledge. For example, I learned that the mobster guy from Chicago, Bugs Moran, was a graduate of Creighton, St. Paul Creighton. Also learned that Schuyler Colfax's son got married right down the street. And best of all, pardon? Can you hear me? You can't hear me? I wonder if I should get the microphone there. And how about you, Greg? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, let's see. How about you, Scott? Can you hear me? You want to change chairs?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, but
Absolutely.
her, you want to come up here? I'll try to see if I can get the microphone. I'm not much of a microphone guy, but we want you to make sure that we hear you. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the best part is that Jesse James wasn't anywhere near Northfield. Now keep in mind, don't ever go down to Northfield and tell us.
I'm not going to stand here and hold it for you.
Come
Sorry.
on. Can you hear me now?
There you
Yeah. Okay, good. I'll do the best I can then. So then I've got to keep in mind, I'm not getting old and senile. I am old and senile. So now I get to hold a microphone and then operate. I got a clicker here. I did have a pointer. I wonder what I did with that.
That was what you just picked up was the pointer.
Huh?
What you just picked up was the
No, but I
pointer.
had a pointer too, a
Oh.
little red flasher thing. I wonder what I did with that. Oh, here it is.
I can also attach the microphone to a stand. Would you rather have that? instead of
Yeah,
holding it?
because then I can manipulate all these other devices that are far too complicated for me. Thanks too for what I call the French Royalists. They got some other name. French Royalists, as you know, no equality, liberty, and fraternity for them. They still observe that France is run by a monarchy. And there are a whole pile of them up and down the river, including St. Paul and St. Genevieve by St. Louis. Thanks also to Emily Kay and this society. Thanks to my friend Claudia and my honorary daughter Heather too for getting the Spreckers. There is Sprecker spot back there that's probably the best pop in the Midwest. It's brewed with, can you hear
Arranged
me?
for you. Yeah, I'll just get this arranged for you.
So let's see, yeah, thanks very much. Huguenots, Geneva to Hancock. Now allow me, if you don't mind, an editorial comment. I outthought myself. And it's okay, there's nothing I can do about that now. My intent though, when I was setting this up, was simply to explain to the French Catholics who now, they got their own church in downtown St. Paul, you probably knew that, St. Louis Church, to tell them that there's Protestants, and I was just frightened to tell them that there's Protestant French because I would get tormented or something. But you know, they're really quick on the uptake. Most of the people of French are really well educated. Many of them are fluent in French, they've got advanced degrees, and they know all that. So what has started out just as an explanation has turned into this absolute Rubik's Cube of unending knowledge about the French and the history of France. And it's just, it's never ending. So we'll just have to try to cut this off as best as we can. I gotta be careful though not to make up stuff or to just guess. So we'll try to be truthful. But I could spend the rest of the night on any one of the subjects. Keep in mind the word Huguenot is a fake name. It's a made-up name. For every person that pronounces it Huguenot, 3 pronounce it Huguenot. In the society, the Huguenot Society in Charleston, South Carolina, they pronounce it Huguenot. They say that it's a pejorative name hatched by Catholics to be derogatory to the Protestants in Geneva. And I don't know if it is, you're on your own. We don't want to spend the rest of the night talking about what it means. It probably, see, it was born in Geneva, which as you know is in Switzerland, but they gave sanctuary kind of to Protestants over the years. And they've got a multiple language over. There's no such thing as, you know, a Swiss, so a lot of them speak German, Italian, and French. So probably Huguenot comes from German and has got a Dutch or French flourish that means loyal roommates bonded to each other. So the Huguenots, though, are just Protestants who follow our hero, John Calvin. John Calvin was pure French. He was well educated, he was very intelligent, he was born in the start of the 16th century and didn't last very long. Started off to be a lawyer, but then got to be a priest, and then with the evolution of the Reformation, hatched his own religion and his own philosophy that became known as Calvinism. And he was the original French Huguenot, and the French Huguenots are really followers of John Calvin. Oh yeah, my ancestors were French, and that is our brand. That is what we lost. We had to get out of France, otherwise they would have hung us, or we would have had to work in the galleys, so we had to scoot out of there. And that is, they were vineyard people. They had wine, and so that's our brand. And I picked up a bottle, I can't remember where I got it, so do you suppose anybody's gonna make reparations to me for all of my vineyard that I lost? Too bad. Oh, let's do this. Let's do this. I've got an extra copy of a book called The French Huguenots and the Wars of Religion that's autographed. And I'll give it away, but we'll have a contest. So the next picture has got 5 famous Huguenots, and the first person to identify all 5 of them gets it. Now be honest. When I flip the picture on, you raise your hand and then identify all 5. So you could just raise your hand for the hell of it and then wonder who they are. Don't do that, please. Just in good faith. So just tell me who those 5 people are.
Samuel Beckett.
Okay, just raise your hand. If you can name all 5 of them, raise your hand. And then the pressure's on to name them. And if you can't, then we'll have to go to plan B. We don't want to spend the rest of our life doing it. These are 5 famous people. Yeah. Does anybody want to try? We've got Samuel Beckett. And Samuel Beckett actually was a... Yeah.
Yeah.
You're on your...
Is that how it's
Samuel Adams?
No.
Paul Revere.
Is it? So we got 2 people. We got 2 we've identified.
Mary Travers.
Yeah.
3.
Mary Travers, yeah. Who's the bald-headed guy up there?
Yeah, who is that?
She looks Russian.
No.
No?
He's a Huguenot, a French Huguenot.
He's a French Huguenot.
He's South African.
Oh, my. Nelson Mandela.
No. Yeah.
Declare?
He got the Nobel Prize for trying to make black people part of South Africa. He's a Huguenot. Yeah, at least one more. One of the most famous Huguenot families, whoops. One of the most famous Huguenot families in America was the family of Antoine Revere, who had 5 sons, including Paul Revere.
Paul Revere.
Let's go to plan B. Who paid the Indians $24 for Manhattan?
Peter Stuyvesant.
Pardon?
Wasn't it Peter Stuyvesant?
No.
Shoot.
There's a point to me asking that.
Is there, do we know the name?
Yeah, I mean, every kid in Minnesota, when they started out first grade, was told that the Indians were paid $24 for Manhattan, and we were all told who paid them the 24.
It was the people from the Netherlands.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, was it?
That's why we're going to talk about that.
He was from Switzerland.
No. Okay, we'll go on. We just.
Peter
I want- Huh?
Minuit.
Yeah, who said it?
There.
He was Dutch. I knew it was a Peter.
Yeah.
He wasn't Dutch, though. That's what we're going to talk about that later. Be that as it may, you get the buck.
It's a French name.
Minuet.
Yeah.
So it's a Walloon name.
Okay, that's French.
No, it's not. That's just an obligatory cross. Everybody's got their own cross, whether they're Catholics or Lutherans, or that just happens to be the Huguenot cross. Let's see. Oh yeah, this might be kind of helpful now to make sense out of this. This is a timeline for and this is a blend of French history, Catholic history, the Reformation, the Renaissance. So we started off with the dynasties of Europe that are the Caputs. They call them the Capetians. And that started up in 987, and they gave rise to the French monarchies in the House of Valois and then the House of Bourbons. They also, believe it or not, have got 2 dynasties left in Europe. They are the monarchy in Luxembourg and Spain. Whatever happened to Franco? I thought is he still alive?
Died in 75.
So then, take your choice on when the Renaissance started. I just put down 1434 to find a date. You can argue about that. Be that as it may, it started off in Italy, probably in Florence. My guess is Florence. But it started with one of the most famous families in the area, the Medici family. who has a tremendous importance in French history also, Catholic history, Italian history, and all kinds of histories. John Calvin, 1509, and then Pope Leo, who's a Medici incidentally, did you know that? And then it goes on down there, Luther, and then Catherine, whose real name was Katrina di Medici, hooked up with the French. You get the religious wars. Anyway, we'll kind of stumble through this as best as we can. Let's see. Oh, he's actually a Dutchman, but he knew that the Catholic Church ought to change. So he came up with a new thought process, and he probably would have been the father of the Reformation, except the Catholic Church paid him off and treated him like a king, and he got the best of everything. So he was at odds with our hero Martin Luther and John Calvin for years over free will and how they should celebrate religion. And you're on your own. I always pronounce it Desiderius Erasmus. So now there's our hero, Martin Luther. Martin Luther, as nuts as that guy was, and he was probably a manic depressive in a state of psychosis a lot of the times, and he was OCD, but he's also fluent in Hebrew, Latin, Greek, and all the vernacular languages. He knew the Bible backwards and forwards. He was a Dominican monk, and his subject was the Old Testament. So at the same time that Leo X was the Pope, Martin Luther made a pilgrimage to Rome. Now, Leo, that's a bad, why would you, if you were the Pope, why would you look like that? He should have cut his picture better. So at the same time that Luther went down there to make his pilgrimage to Rome, Leo, whose goal was to make Rome the center of the universe, to trump Disney World, ran out of money. I mean, look at that. St. Peter's Basilica. That is, where would you rather go visit in life than but he ran out of money. So he hatched a scheme to make money that had to do with rejiggering dead people so that they could go up and play a harp rather than lick toilet bowls. And then better yet, he had a reservation system to get to go to heaven. So at the same time that he did that, Martin Luther happened to go to Rome, and all of the fundraisers were down there, and Martin Luther hit the ceiling, went back to Germany, and came up with the proverbial 95 Theses, that he was, there's still a edict someplace excommunicating him from, I'm sure he cared, he's dead now. And then Charles V, the head of the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, put a hit out on him, and the reason that he didn't carry that out is because all these German princes weren't too keen on paying homage to the Catholic Church, so he skated through. Parenthetically, Charles V, the head of the Holy Roman Empire, and the Valois family from France, both Catholics, hated each other. And Charles V couldn't do anything because, believe it or not, France had an artillery that could have blown the crap out of him. Oh, let's see who we got. This is kind of a half-ass, well, you probably know it's France. Now, keep in mind that all those little orange or those purple pockets are the sanctuaries for Huguenots. So at the peak of the Huguenot existence, in the 16th into the 17th century, at the most, there were 2 million Protestants in France, and that was maybe at the most 10% of the population. Now, the reason that there got to be Protestants in France was that at the same time that Leo was making the nice place in Rome, there was a middle class that was evolving, and there was literacy was increasing. There were Bibles being printed on the press, and so all these people in France started becoming aware of what the Bible really said. Plus, they were developing industries. The biggest deal one that they were developing was the textile industry. So instead of some poor lady, you know, with the spinning wheel and the little loom, they developed power looms, which would be kind of interesting to discuss. However, they worked with hydraulics. So the French developed these power looms, and France, believe it or not, had all kinds of, they had silkworms, and they had, you know, sheep and wool. I'm not sure where the cotton came from, but they were just, and it was the Huguenots that controlled all these industries, including kind of a fledgling steel industry. It was no Pittsburgh, it wasn't even a Birmingham, it was more like Anniston, so you had little pockets of iron and coal, and then the catalyst, what they call coke. And so they could fashion ironworks into steel, fashioning all kinds of products, including the armaments. And those were all run by Protestants, because they could figure out all this stuff. And that's Pope Clement the Seventh. He's also Medici, incidentally. So you had a whole pile of these Protestants just littering France, who were kind of the middle class of France. They were the people, the carpenters, and the people who had the jewelers, and the people with the wineries, and so there were all kinds of that's, now he's one guy who knew what was going on. That's a Valois. He started his kingship in the early 16th century. That is Henri. Is that how you pronounce it, Greg? I'm gonna mispronounce all this, I have no idea.
Henri.
Anyway, we'll just let Greg grit his teeth, and it's everything I can do to pronounce English words, let alone French words. So my second language, incidentally, is German, and nobody understands what I'm talking about, even in English. So if I try to talk in German, nobody's gonna understand. So he knew what was going on, and he starts off early on in the 16th century. The only thing is, he's got a little floozy as a girlfriend, and instead of his wife then is Catherine de' Medici herself. So they send her over from Italy to mate with him to have more Valois in the world. But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to take up with the floozy. But then they put pressure on this guy, you know, to have some kind of a lineage so that they got real Catholics. So he starts breeding Catherine, and they've got 8 or 10 kids. It's not really quite clear. Edo is a real bon vivant, and he likes to joust, where these people go attack each other with all these spears, and he gets whacked in the brain, and he dies of a splinter in the brain. So he has got, that's Catherine herself. Catherine is a de' Medici. In the 16th century, that lady was the most important woman in Europe. She might have even been the most important ruler in Europe because of the tremendous power that France had. And the deal that, and they couldn't call her a queen. She was, see, it was illegal to be a woman and run anything, so they had to call her some fake name like a regent. And she had like 8 kids. 4 of them are really kind of interesting. 3 of them, if you can believe it or not, were dumber than, so she had to run, no, I'm serious, she had to run the country, so she did. And she had a daughter, though, just like Ivanka, beautiful Margaret, the girl, and she was really quick on the uptake. Be that as it may, she ran the country, and if you look at her records, you know she was well educated. She had letters and she did not know whether to poop or bark because they had all these Protestants floating around. She wanted to accommodate them sometimes and sometimes she didn't. So they had a series of wars. There were 8 wars in 30 years and they were just brutal. Believe it or not, the Protestants broke even. They broke even for a couple of reasons. One, they were gifted soldiers and they had control of these steel plants, they had pony herds, and then they were supported in a lot of cases by England, who would come over there and help them out. And then in the middle, see there's a list of them. That scene is from the Battle of Dreux, and they're all brutal. I mean, these people were, if you think these Hamases and these Hezbollahs were wicked, God, you should just read about some of the stuff these people would do. The only thing is they did not have heat-seeking missiles and drones, but they would just torture the crap out of each side. I mean, these were just heinous. You ever study Western religion? One of these was a Roman Catholic and the other one were Calvinist Protestants, and they both followed the second greatest commandment. We figure out how they were following the second greatest commandment. There's a reason in there I can explain to you what they both of them thought the second greatest commandment was, Jesus himself. So in the middle of the whole damn show is one of the most intriguing events in Europe ever, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. In case those of you who showed up for catechism when you were a kid knows who St. Bartholomew is. He was an apostle. And this guy, after the death of Jesus, would go from pillar to post explaining to all these heathens how they should believe in Jesus. So what they did to him, though, they didn't really want to hear that. They tore off his skin. They peeled it off, and he's in Armenia someplace, I think. And of course, because they tore off all his skin, he is now the patron saint of leather upholsterers and butchers. So, and they celebrate his day on August 24th of every year. So in the middle of this whole show, you got Catherine who's floating around running France, and then you got one of her pinhead boys, Charles IX, who's the ostensible king who doesn't know what's going on. Catherine, though, finds out that there is a dreaded Huguenot who is calling the shots, an Admiral Coligny, whatever his name is. And she doesn't like that, so she puts a hit out on him. Now, before she puts the hit out on him, she marries off this Ivanka, Marguerite, to a Bourbon, to Henri of Navarre, to make sure that she tries to further the Valois name. And so they got set up a wedding at Notre Dame itself, but they won't let the dumb Huguenot be in the mass, so they got to have a scaffold to do the wedding. And Margaret's not as, beautiful lady. She does not want to get hooked up with any Huguenot, because by that time they all figured out Calvinists were pietistical, and you start poking or whatever they do, dancing or something, that was illegal. So she wanted to party and be a bon vivant and celebrate everything. So she wasn't going to marry him. So they had the scaffold, and the priest is there, the cardinal, to marry him. You take Henry for your lawful wedded husband. She won't say a word, and then Henry, Charles IX, the brother, the king, is behind her, and he takes his elbow and just whacks her, and she goes, "Ah, that's enough for a cent, so you're married." So then they're held in abeyance for a while, and she puts a hit out on this guy who's kind of running the country, and the guy, and you're on your own. How would you like to study firearms? My guess is mini balls and rifle barrels weren't in existence anyway, so something would be akin to a 50 caliber muzzle loader. I'm not sure. Anyway, she hires a pro. He perches up, and as he's ready to kill Coligny as he's coming along the street, Coligny notices his shoes untied, bends down, so the shot just wings him. They put him in bed, and then here's the deal. The Catholic Church to this day and the Jesuits to this day don't say nothing. They do not take credit for causing the death that happens after this. Nothing. And you know who the Pope is at that time? The calendar guy. The Pope in Gregory, the, what is it, the 13th? What is it? You know, the Gregorian calendar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't say anything, except after all these people are slaughtered, he then has a painting commemorating the event with a medallion to figure out what happened. So, after this guy gets whacked, Charles just lets all of the Catholic people, soldiers and everything, kill all the Protestants. They don't even need a permit. They kill them with impunity. And then you lose track after a while how all these people die, but he dies, and then his brother, there's too many Henrys and too many Charleses, but there's another Henry, to confuse you, who's actually a Valois, Henry III, and then you got the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th wars after that to go up to the end of the century, where they just kill everybody for the hell of it. Just really, love thy neighbor as thyself. So that's a painting that, I think that's the one that Gregory commissions in celebration of killing all the Protestants in France. The lowest number I've seen is 24,000 a week or two, and it goes up to 100,000. And here's the conventional wisdom. The plurality of historians give credit to Catherine for causing this massacre. The Pope gets a hold of her and says, how come you've got all of these Protestants floating around France? You're a Catholic country. You shouldn't have any Protestants. So she puts a hit out on the one guy and then tells her boy, just let the, now we can't prove that. See, because they don't say nothing. I ran into the sex attorney guy the other day, Jeff Anderson, you know, the guy who's suing all the, and he went over to Rome. And I said, did you come across any records about who caused, he can come across any records in Rome. The records in Rome are whatever they feel like the records in Rome are. So we can't prove that, because there's no smoking gun, or there's no etching of the order that came out of Rome to Catherine, so we don't know. That's the calendar guy, Gregory. We still use, don't we use the Gregorian
Yep.
calendar?
Yep.
That is, so then what happens, that is the Protestant, that is the first Bourbon, that is Henry of Navarre. All of the Bourbons flipped to being Protestants in one of the most ironic things in Europe ever, because they get to read the Bible and they figure out what it is, and they all become Protestants, including Henry of Navarre, who becomes Henry IV. Henry then gets to be king. Now his wife Marguerite takes off on, she didn't want anything to do with this dumb bastard. So he becomes the king, and he does the exact wrong thing. He understands that he is in a Catholic country, so he flips from being a Protestant to a Catholic. And all of the Protestants hate him for that. All the Catholics think that that's just a charade, so they don't like him anyway. So what he does toward the end of the century is he enacts what's called the Edict of Nantes, Nantes, that makes it okay to be a Huguenot in France. And he knows what's going on. So for 15 years, from the late 16th century to 1610, France has got a flourishing everything, economy, the arts. For the most part, Huguenots are left alone for those 15 years. He gets whacked, and that leaves a moron, his boy, as the king, who's, oh God, you won't believe who got to be king then. The king was, do you know that Henri of Navarre was the grandfather of the Sun King himself. So he mates with another de Medici, who is probably Catherine's first cousin once or twice removed. Try to figure out the relationship in these people, and it's like untangling fishing line. So anyway, his kid gets to be king, and he is dumb as a post too. So the kingship, it vacillates between the mind, one of the most dreaded human beings to French Huguenots there is, Cardinal Richelieu. Richelieu don't believe in no stinking edict of Nantes. He don't believe in no Protestants. All he wants to do is kill Protestants. And he has the most profound effect that anybody's ever had on Canada and North America. Before the revocation that happens later, he revokes the Edict of Nantes in North America. It becomes illegal to be a Protestant Huguenot in Canada. Now, the Huguenots were the middle management. They were the navigators, they were the battle commanders. And what do you suppose was happening in Canada? Canadians were holding off the dreaded British. They were coming down into Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the Ohio River Valley. So when all these Huguenots got whacked, that left them almost defenseless in North America. And figure out what flag is flying over Canada now. There's no French left. They're all dead because this dumb bastard made it illegal. No, I'm serious. He's so he controlled France until our hero, the Sun King, comes. And you know, when Elizabeth died the other day, was that Elizabeth II?
Yeah.
She missed the record by 2 years. He still holds the record for the longest served monarchy in the world. 72 years, 110 days. And he was the most brutal, he just hated everybody. The guy was a lunatic, and if you didn't have anything better to do, you do his MMPI just to see what in the world was wrong with him. And so he repealed the Edict of Nantes toward, I suppose like in roughly 16, I'm losing track of years, like 1695 or 1685. And God, that guy. Although, where would you rather go? If you're going to Europe, would you rather go to St. Peter's Basilica or to Versailles? Yeah, we all want to go and see the Eiffel Tower and the Art and the Louvre, but there's no better place, is there, than to go to Versailles to get the flavor of it. So anyway, that's what we owe that in that case. I had listened to an audio tape for 15 hours on the reign of the Bourbon family from 1610 to kind of the start of the Revolution. 15 hours. It was 15 hours of different tortures and what they do to these people and how they would put them in the galleys and chain the women up to the wall and do, geez, a brutal thing what they would do to these people. And you don't want to get into what's the deal is, but these people would smash up these people's arms and then they'd just pull them apart. But that was good. It's, how many years is that of torturing all these people? How many years that is? From 1610 to, the carnage stopped in 1762. And there's no really great source on why. There's still Protestants left. It probably was that France was getting to be so insane that not only the Protestants knew that they were nutcases, but everybody else did. They had so many great resources, yet they threw them away. let's go back once. The guy that took over from the Sun King was Louis the 15th, wasn't his son. And they called him, what did they call him? The Beloved. Louis the Beloved. Louis the Beloved, if he was alive in Minnesota today, would be committed for perpetuity as a sexual psychopath. He got tired of his mistress, so he had his mistress comb the countryside for 9 and 10 and 11-year-old, 12-year-old girls to pleasure himself, and then he functioned on ethyl alcohol daily. And by that time, everybody knew that they were run by, and their resources were getting frittered away. And then, so we were in the beginnings of the revolution, and this carnage pretty much stopped by that time. And then that gave rise to Louis the 16th, and it was just too late by that time. Interestingly enough, a lot of these, here's a mistake that the Catholics made, and the Jesuits made too. They thought that the Protestants were fighting a civil war. We're gonna have a new rulership and democracy and a republic. They weren't. They didn't care. They were just fighting to celebrate their own church. But the Catholics viewed them as being revolutionaries. Anyway, the point is, Voltaire, was educated in a Jesuit, had a Jesuit education. He didn't much care about Huguenots, but by that time, they're just not gonna put up with all these nutcases. So we gotta end. Napoleon, incidentally, was really he treated everybody equal. Jews, Huguenots, anybody. I mean, the guy, whatever else you say about Napoleon, he was a kind of an equal rights guy, and then in the Restoration after him, but see, there's no Huguenots left hardly anymore. The guy that did this book says that in France now, there are more Ishmaelites, Mohammedans, than there are Protestants. There's a few floating around. There's a few Wesleyans, and there's some Friends, some Quakers, and a few Huguenot churches, but there are not very many left, so it's kind of a dead issue over there. And so we're gonna have to cut this off because it's Ted's birthday, and we want to celebrate Ted's birthday. Be that as it may, then we get into one of the more interesting things about the dysphoria. What happened to these people? There were 1 million people that took off from France and went hither and yon. And they went all over the world. Now, the reason you don't know what happened to them is they assimilated into whatever society they went into. So in America now, it's not push 1 for Spanish and 2 for French. They just spoke whatever language they were supposed to, and they changed their names. Ironically, a lot of them went into areas and became the battle commanders. They went into Germany, for example, and Frederick helped them out, and they became part of the Prussian army, and they came back and just tore France apart in the Franco-Prussian War. They went to England, they became battle commanders in England. People coveted Huguenots because of their intelligence, because of the textiles. They go to Ireland and Scotland and England. So what happens is this dysphoria becomes kind of an individual study on whatever you happen to be interested in. My ancestors migrated through Switzerland and then went up into what's called the Schleswig-Holstein area, which keeps changing back and forth all the time. Right now it's German. And my great-grandfather was accused of being a Dane because he fought for the Danish army against the Germans to try to take over the Schleswig-Holstein area. But they're wound up all over the place. And some of the interesting ones now, wow, it's a crappy picture. It's the best I could do though of America. So the East Coast is littered with all kinds of settlements from the French. And they wound up hither and yon. A lot of them wound up in Florida, South Carolina. The German people Huguenots got put with the Pennsylvania Dutch, went up into Pennsylvania. A bunch of them got paired with Walloons. We don't have a lot of time, but to confuse you, a Walloon is an ethnic group unto itself, but they always get paired with Huguenots. So in America, the migration is referred to as the Huguenot Walloon migration. Walloons are an ethnic group of themselves. It started off as French, went to Belgium. There's a place in Belgium called Wallonia. Then a lobe of them got to be Calvinists and got to the Netherlands, but Spain didn't like that, so they blew apart all the Walloons. Interestingly enough, and then back to Peter Minuit. Peter Minuit was a Walloon, and but he wrote in Dutch, so that when he bought Manhattan, I don't think it had anything to do with religion. It was just that the Dutch were gifted sailors and had a great navy because of the Frisians. So they get credit then for coming to Manhattan. Also the Walloons do too. Let's see, how else can I confuse you? Yeah, there's always something. Oh yeah, don't ever try to figure out Calvin religion. John Calvin was a French Huguenot. If you hear the word in America called Calvinists, they're not French. They are Dutch, and their center of their universe is in Gerald Ford's hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, with Calvin College. Those are not French people. Those are Dutch people, you know, Betsy DeVos and Freddie Fikema and all the people down in Northwest Iowa. They are not French. There's sites that's John Calvin's theology. It's not, that's Dutch theology. Interestingly enough, you means that I'm elected, I'm in, I get to go and play a part in heaven no matter what I do. Too bad. And what he said was, Simonson, you're too stupid to figure out why it is that you a chosen person. He used the word labyrinth. Anyway, so they get paired, and this religion spreads into Holland, into this New Walloon, and they're all paired and they all get shipped over to America. There are other pockets though where they go to, including South America and the Caribbean. Alexander Hamilton, for example, is a Huguenot. Besides North America and England, my favorite place where they wound up is South Africa. They go down to South Africa and they become Afrikaners. And Paul Cryer, you know, the head of the Boer Republic, just loves them because they're Protestants, they're white guys, they don't give heed to any black people, and they are gifted soldiers. They probably extend the Boer War for at least a year when England sent down every soldier they could to kill all these people. And then, as I say, de Klerk was a Huguenot, you know, the noble guy who tried to make black people equal to them. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, this is Charleston now. It's got the only French Protestant church in the Western Hemisphere. They are true Huguenots or French. And you see that there's more of those buggies than Central Park and Disney World combined. And that is, honest to God, and that's right almost next to John C. Calhoun's church. It's just right down, almost right next to it. John C. Calhoun, in case you don't care, is very good. I went into that church, and I went in there dressed kind of like this sans tie, and I was underdressed. Every male in there had a suit on with a tie. When's the last time any of you saw a seersucker suit? that was the suit, and they were different molds with bow ties. I'm not kidding you. The ladies in there didn't wear a skirt or blouse, they wore dresses. And they all had on jewelry that was not ostentatious or costume jewelry, very tasteful jewelry. That place was just, and they got it. Oh yeah, well I won't, but if you think you have ever seen a liturgy that's gonna tear you apart, I have never seen a more brutal one than their, we acknowledge we transgress in various ways thy holy commandments, so that we draw down on ourselves through thy righteous judgment, condemnation, and death. We are, O Lord, for having offended thee. And they're a church unto themselves, that's their own. And everybody treated me there very nicely and greeted me, and I could not get the two ministers to engage me. I think they were, it wasn't anything against me, I think they just had their own little issues going on. Oh, here's something that's really kind of interesting. Now picture Canada and all the French people that wound up in Canada. This is a list of the people who ran Canada from 1540 to 1632. Samuel Champlain was a blended Huguenot Catholic. He was baptized Catholic, but he didn't, if you wanted to be see, a lot of them people are Protestants. And so Canada really started off being a Protestant kind of a place, or ecumenical, until Richelieu made it illegal in 1633. Is that Duluth, Greg?
Could be.
Anyway, he's a Protestant. Aren't you related to Duluth?
No, I'm
Oh, okay,
related to my nurse who are, he was Catholic.
okay. Now, if you don't wanna do anything in life, and you just wanna sit in your hovel looking at the walls, don't look at the internet, don't look at Wikipedia, just collect stamps and you will learn all kinds of superfluous nonsense. Like where Moravia is, and where Moldova is, and who Madam C.J. Walker is, and who Colin Kelly is. Those are beautiful engraved stamps that America used to make, the United States used to have great stamps. Those are the Huguenot Walloon issues. Each one of those has a story in themselves. The top one is a ship that the Huguenot Walloon sailed up the Hudson into Albany. The second one is a scene in Albany, New York, and the one on the bottom is kind of a misnomer. That's a monument down north of St. Augustine, Florida. The French ought to get credit for being the first white guys to settle the East Coast. They don't. And the reason is because of the dreaded Spanish. Every time a French guy would get on the East Coast, Catholic or Protestant, they'd blow the crap out of them. So St. Augustine wasn't formed until 1565. Paris Island, Charles Fort Paris Island, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. The Huguenots got there in 1562. And there were Huguenots that floated out of there, but the Spanish came and blew them up. So anyway, that bottom monument is a monument to the Huguenots on a place called the Johns River, north of St. Augustine. That's a fake Huguenot church. That is in New Rochelle, New York. New Rochelle, nobody remembers Laurel Petrie or Bob Petrie, what was the name of that?
The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Dick Van Dyke. Laura and Dick Petrie lived in New Rochelle, New York.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. New Rochelle, New York is a pure Huguenot community. It's up, I get mixed up between the Queens and the Bronx, but it's on the north edge. So that's a monument, that's actually a Presbyterian church. And Presbyterians are not French Huguenots, but their guy John Knox, knew Calvin, and so Presbyterians are accused of being Calvinists. But anyway, that's in memory to them. That's in Staten Island. That's not a Huguenot church either. That's just in memory of the Huguenots. That's actually an Anglican church, or what do they call them? Episcopalian. And I missed that one. That one is on the tip of Manhattan at Battery Park. You walk across the Brooklyn Bridge from the east to the west, and that's where that monument is. And that's about where Hoobie-Doo got it. That's the monument that from the house of Montezuma Place, Paris Island. There is a place called Huguenot Street, which is really a balloon place, and it's up across the river from Poughkeepsie. There's 7 buildings there that are intact from roughly 1700. And that was settled by, and that's where Du Bois comes from, the founder of the NAACP. Du Bois was a Huguenot, an actual Huguenot. His grandfather was a Frenchman who dorked a slave lady to become this blended guy, but he abandoned his Huguenot ancestry, and he more warmed up. He wondered why everybody mistreated all the black people. Now, make no mistake about it, these Huguenots were terrible slavers. They hooked up with the Dutch and the balloons, and they sailed up the Hudson. Do you know that New York was a slave state until 1840? I went to this place, and the leader of it, grandfather owned Sojourner Truth, and I saw the bill of sale. They didn't call her Sojourner Truth when they sold her for whatever they sold her to. They were also not too kind to all the Indians. They would give them a quart of wild turkey and some seashells, and then screw them off to Lord knows where. But anyway, these are still intact buildings. That's on the St. Johns River, just north of St. Augustine. But they didn't have quite enough firepower to deal with the brutal Spanish. That's the monument in South Africa to the Huguenots. That's the monument in Copenhagen to the Huguenots. So anyway, you gotta cut this off someplace. My intent when I started all this just was to explain to people that there were French Protestants besides. And you could go on forever with this thing. It just goes on and on and on and on. And I don't, it just, and the sources are just almost, a lot of the sources come from diaries of Protestants. So many of the narratives are pro-Protestant and anti-Catholic. The Jesuits don't say anything at all about this. And Rome doesn't much either. They kind of acknowledge that there was something that bad's happened. And so you get what you might think is a colored history. I don't know for sure. I mean, some of these things actually, distortions really kind of happened. So where do you find, I'm not a historian. I gotta just be careful not making up everything. And I just go, so part of this is oral tradition from my family. And a lot of it is, this book and that book, and you can't use, I like Wikipedia. I'm a fan of Wikipedia. Their article on the Huguenots is bad though, although their one on the Moors is kind of good in Catholic Medici. So it's really kind of loosey-goosey. So anyway, I don't believe in questions. Let's go home. In my world, there are no answers, there's only more questions.
Where does Hancock figure in it?
Oh, yeah, okay. You know what, though, we go down rabbit hills. I was just about gonna cut off people, because when you get a question, I can go on for an hour. But it's not my fault. My great-grandfather fought in the Danish army against the Germans to try to take control of the Schleswig-Holstein area. There were a series of wars that happened at about the same time our Civil War happened. The Danes had a great army, plus they were gifted shipbuilders. In fact, the Craig Jorgensen rifle kind of comes out of Denmark. Be that as it may, so they at that time controlled the Danish West Indies. The Virgin Islands are actually Danish, and they had these ships. So great-granddad, after he goes to war with the Germans, is shipped over to the Virgin Islands, the mother of all vacation spots. He doesn't go AWOL, he just says, well, listen, my term of endearment, or whatever they call it, is up. So I want to try a new life. He then sails up the Mississippi River to Wisconsin, and he signs up for the Wisconsin 3rd Artillery and fights in the American Civil War. And then he comes across a reindeer herder from the Keweenaw Peninsula, Copper Harbor, and then they migrate over to Minnesota, and he's kind of an itinerant carpenter, and they build mills, and he knows about 8 languages, and they go to a place called Terrace, Minnesota, and they go to Alexandria, and then the St. Paul and Pacific Railroad is being built out to Morris, Minnesota. You know it now as what's called the BNSF. And so he goes down to Hancock, because that's where the end of the line was to build. So they got, Hancock is on the old Great Northern, the other side of Wilmer and this side of Morris in Stevens County. And they still are frightened of the Catholics, but there aren't any Catholics in Hancock. The Norwegians won't help them out because they're not Norwegian, so they get helped out by the Wesleyans and the Congregationalists. And then my ma's born there, and her ma then pawns us off as fake Norwegian Lutherans. So why would you do that? So Hancock's a town now that's littered by what are called apostolics, who are Swiss German Anabaptists, who are an interesting group of people too. There are no answers in this world, and my boy is 40, so they don't celebrate his birthday. And as the travel from Updorians always used to say, so it goes. Thanks much. Enjoy your life. And then pick up that Sprecher's on the way out. That's